I copied. Different bands. We can operate in, for instance, the 20 meter band. Means the wavelength is about 20 meters long. The frequencies are around 14 megahertz, 14 million cycles per second. And then the three different levels that show on there are the three different classes of license. They have different privileges. There's got to be a reason when you step up to extra from general, for instance, you get a few more privileges. Not a lot, mostly bragging rights, but you do get some frequencies that you can operate on. And we can operate clear down into the or up into the microwaves. I think in frequency, so it's up into the microwaves, those very short ones. And there are people that do. They like to really get on that, I don't know, from one mountaintop to another. They'll do some of that, different things that way in the microwaves. And just the last few years, we got some very long waves. Long waves are kind of unique. They're the 2,000 meters, 2,200 meters. That's over a mile long wavelength. Completely different properties. And, but they said, you know, amateurs can play with that. Is there usefulness? Well, yeah, some. But there's also some play value. But a ham station, what's it look like? It can be a variety of things. The basic home ham station, you gotta have a transceiver. An antenna tuner is optional, very convenient, and you need an antenna, and of course something to power it with. But in reality, that's a ham station. It's got a power supply, it's got a battery, it's got an antenna, and it's got a transceiver in there. That works. There's all different kinds, various prices too. There's some out there, those cheap Chinese knockoffs things. You can get these for 25, 30 bucks even on Amazon. It helps if you know what you're dealing with, and no guarantees. But they actually work.
They work good.
Yeah, so they're out there. When it comes to another station, this is one. I just found this is works on shortwave, you know, on all the bands. Also 2 meters and 440, the UHF and VHF. But it even has, you know, batteries built in. It's got a set of AA's in there. But when I bought this used, I found it down in there's a ham radio store in Kansas City. It was on the shelf as a used one, and I just couldn't resist. And my wife is very tolerant. She's put up with me for 50 years, so she's very tolerant. But anyway, first time I tested it out, we went to field day, and we had an antenna strung up in the trees, which was literally a couple of chunks of house wiring with an insulator between, and a piece of coax cable coming down, and I plugged into this on 6 meters, which is a VHF band, but conditions were right, and first thing I did, with the batteries in there, which means it was doing 2.5 watts. 2.5, that's what, a third of what a night light is. 2.5 watts, and I made contact with somebody in Colorado. Well, it proved to me that what I bought was working, and still amazing that on how little power it can take. There are people that like to build stuff and see how little they can do. There's people out there that will put a full transceiver in an Altoids tin and communicate. Most of those tend to use Morse code because they're simpler to build than a full voice radio. But that's all it really takes. What can they look like? Again, the one there on the upper left is, you know, similar to what I've got here. You know, just radio, and they got a power supply on there. The one in the upper right, and I just stole some of these pictures off the internet. It's wonderful to do that. There's probably a more typical station. The one down in the lower right, Yeah, we got nutcases in every hobby. You know, some people have lots and lots of equipment. I got lots of equipment too, but you know, you can buy the toys, but you can't buy the skill. You gotta work on that. But some of these guys have been at it for lots and lots of years, and they tend to keep everything. The one on the lower left, I know it's a small picture, but you recognize the guy? Yeah, Tim Allen. And I think that was, they said that was the one where it was he was trying to get away from the Thanksgiving hubbub, and so he and his grandson went downstairs or something. I don't know. I didn't watch the show much. But there's a lot of people, and Tim is an actual ham. I mentioned that later. We need an antenna in your dreams. This happens to be the big dish down at Canberra that NASA uses for their Deep Space Network. And right now, that's the only antenna that will communicate with the Voyagers, however many billion miles away they are now. The transmitters on the Voyagers are like 22 watts. When they were new, I don't know what they're putting out now. And they can still get messages back from them. If you just saw the other day, they shut down another science experiment on there, you know, one more instrument. To keep them going a few more years, they should go probably another decade before they completely run out of power. It uses a plutonium battery, so you know, it lasts a long time, but not forever. But yeah, you don't need one quite that good. Although it'd be nice. This kind of thing. Yeah, that on the right, that's 2 coat hangers. It will work. That was in this month's, one of the magazines published. And I just happened to see it as it came across, and I glanced at it and said, that's cool, so I grabbed that picture. Yeah, 2 coat hangers will work as a pretty fair antenna. For most people that want to do work on the short waves, they're going to have something more like that drawing there. And that's what we use at field day a lot. We've done different things, different kinds of antennas, but you know, 2 chunks of wire cut to the right length, strung between 2 trees, does amazingly well. Typical field day will communicate with, you know, not working very hard at it. We'll do a couple hundred contacts around the country because there's a lot of people out there trying to talk. If we worked at it hard, we can get, you know, several hundred. A couple of years ago, I think we had over 400 contacts. Some on CW, Morse code, some by phone, using voice. But, you know, that's just using a maximum of 100 watts. You know, the power it takes for a light bulb, you can go all over the country and literally around the world. Last year we got somebody in the Czech Republic. The year before we had several other countries. We've gotten, you know, from Cuba. Hawaii doesn't have a lot of hams out there, but you know, we've gotten them a time or two in different places. But we'll get a lot in Canada and the US where they do have a lot of field day activity going on. What I mentioned going around the world, how does it work? Well, we say, well, they bounce off the ionosphere. It doesn't actually bounce off the ionosphere, but up high enough, there's a layer of charged particles charged by the sun. All that solar wind has to do something. And it varies day and night, but there's different layers, and it can vary with frequencies. And the wavelengths of a certain range will go up and refract back. Much the same way, this is the old physics teacher coming out, when you're driving down the highway in the summertime and you look ahead and it looks like wet pavement, that's the light of the sky beyond coming down, refracting because of the heat right above the concrete, right into your eyes. And light will refract from that heat differential. Matter of fact, I have seen the light out at the Cedar Creek corner. There was one spot where under the right conditions, I saw it refract that same way. Driving at night, wait a second, there's a funny light in the wrong spot. Well, I realized that, yeah, it was just refracting off the pavement. It's got to be just perfect conditions, but I've seen it a couple times. So light will refract, radio waves will too. Some frequencies won't. Higher frequencies like the VHF, straight through the ionosphere. They don't care. That's why if you're talking to the space station or something, you use higher frequencies. The lower ones will get you around the world, out of sight. As a matter of fact, it not only will bounce, they'll bounce multiple times. And there's a lot of other methods where this will go. You can actually have it bounce between wavelengths and go long distances. A friend was in Hawaii, up on a mountaintop, and could talk to California because it was trapped between layers of the ionosphere. And I will apologize for going long, but just mention here different modes. You can use AM mode, single sideband is more common. There's a whole bunch of digital modes out there. We have repeaters. You talk to out to a repeater and it retransmits, so you don't have to be in line of sight using a handheld. And other activities, people do a variety of different things. A lot of guys like to contest. They like that thrill. They want to see how many people they can talk to in 24 hours. Sometimes they don't sleep very well. Or just plain talking. People will go out to parks and talk to other people. How many people how many parks can you talk from? Or how many parks can you talk to? They keep track, and there's websites. So, all different things. Building equipment, building antennas, amateur satellites. An amateur satellite is a 4-inch cube. That's up there right now going around. You can contact. You can use a fancy rig like the one we showed down at the lower right. You can also use a handheld antenna, and she's got 2 little handhelds there on her belt, and it works. And it's quite possible, this may be a setup, but it's quite possible she could actually be working that. And of course communications, when everything else fails, you can get through. But I will guarantee you, those guys on those keys haven't had a key in their hand ever. You are not going to transmit like that, poking it. So a few famous hams. There's a variety out there. You may have heard of a few of them. I started looking to see, and they had a list, and there were people I didn't realize. Priscilla Presley had a ham license. Who knew? I don't know how active. So, what's next? Hey, you can't predict. I will say there's a lot of equipment out there that is cheaper. Spectrum analyzer, there's tools that will work very good. 20 years ago, a spectrum analyzer like this one would have cost 30 grand. I paid 100 and a quarter for it. That's Chinese made, but they work. And they're available. That's how much electronics is advanced. So there's just test equipment, and there's other things same way. With that equipment, I've been doing some playing, and it's really neat. And I apologize, I got too long-winded. Any questions?
No, thank you.
Right.
Is the AM radio in the electric car solvable?
Oh, hey, I got a Prius. It's got an inverter, same as an electric car, and I have absolutely no interference on AM radio. So yes, it is not a technical problem. It may be a financial one for the companies.
Yeah,
I don't understand that, but I've been driving a Prius for 23 years, and it's got all the inverters, it's got batteries. Any source of interference would be there, and they manage just fine to overcome it. Yeah.
What